While I was still rinsing wedding glitter out of my hair, they were transferring $13,000 out of my account. I had just paid for my brother's entire wedding, and the next morning I woke up to find my mother, my sister, and her husband had emptied my savings. No apology, no remorse. Just one sentence I'll never forget. You're single. You don't need that much. This isn't just a story about stolen money. It's about what happens when your kindness becomes a currency your family feels entitled to. Stay with me because the moment I decided to fight back, everything changed. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 35, a financial director based in Portland, Oregon. Last week, I flew down to Santa Monica for my younger brother, Eli's wedding. It was a warm coastal day. The ocean glittered under a pastel sky, and everyone kept saying it felt like a movie. Fairy lights strung across the outdoor patio. Soft jazz humming in the background, people laughing, glasses clinking. And it should have been unforgettable, because I'd paid for almost all of it. Eli's young, just finished paying off student loans with his now wife, Hannah. My parents retired living on a fixed income. So when it came to the venue, catering even, Hannah's gown, I stepped up. Without question. It felt right. Family helps family. At least, that's what I thought. The morning after Marcus, my boyfriend of 2 years, and I were checking out of the hotel. He was humming while zipping up our suitcase. I pulled out my phone to pay for the room and froze. "What is it?" Marcus asked instantly. Alert. My hands were shaking. "My bank account. It's missing $13,000. He came over, eyes narrowing as I scrolled. Just last week, I had $21,000 in there. Now there was barely $8,000. We looked through the transaction history. My heart fell. 3 large transfers. $4,000 to Rachel Bloom, $5,000 to Kevin Bloom, $4,000 to Karen Carter. Rachel is my sister Kevin, her husband. Karen is my mother. All transfers processed at 10:47 p.m. the night before I was in the shower. Then my phone had been on the nightstand. I could feel the air leave my lungs. It wasn't just the money, it was the audacity. Marcus saw it too. "They used your phone." I didn't answer. I couldn't. We rode the elevator down in silence. The reality of it hit harder than I expected. I'd always given without asking. Helped Rachel with Olivia's private school tuition, paid Mom's medical bills last winter. Chipped in when Kevin's car broke down. Never once did I ask for repayment. Never once did I say no. But now they'd helped themselves. My phone buzzed. It was my mother. I answered, trying to keep my voice level. "Hey, Mom, I need to ask you something. There were some transfers from my account last night. Do you know anything about them?" She was silent for a moment, then chuckled, like I'd asked about a forgotten grocery list. "Oh, that, I figured you'd notice sooner. Rachel said it was fine. It's for the wedding, sweetheart. A thank you of sorts." "A thank you." My voice cracked. "You took $13,000 without asking. Don't be so dramatic. Emily, you're single. You have a great job. You don't need all that money sitting around. It wasn't yours to touch. Rachel guessed your password. You really should pick something stronger than your childhood cat's name." I was stunned. Rachel had guessed my password and transferred my money. Mom knew, Mom approved. "Mom," I said slowly, trying not to cry. "This is theft." "No, it's family. You always say you're generous. Well, we just made it easier for you to be." Then she hung up. Marcus took the phone from my hand gently. "Emily, we're going to the bank now." But I was still standing there in the hotel lobby with my world rearranging itself around me. They didn't just take money. They took my trust. They took years of silent giving and turned it into an obligation. And worse than what they did was how they reacted, like I was the one being unreasonable, like kindness should come without boundaries, like my financial stability was theirs to divide. Later, sitting in the car, Marcus asked, "What do you want to do?" I looked out the window, voice barely audible. I don't know, but they're not sorry, and that was the heartbreak. The drive back to Portland was quiet. Marcus kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting gently on mine. The ocean gave way to winding roads, and the wedding weekend already felt like something from another lifetime. A dream turned sideways. At home, I dropped my suitcase by the door and went straight to the kitchen. I didn't unpack, didn't change. I just opened my laptop, pulled up my bank records, and began scrolling. 3 years. That's how far back I went. I started marking every transfer made to family, every loan, every favor, every "I'll pay you back next week" that never materialized. $600 for Rachel's heating bill during that freak February storm, $1 and $200 for Kevin's car repairs, twice $2,000 for Mom's medication that month. She was in and out of urgent care. $500 for Olivia's school field trip. Birthday gifts, graduation gifts, covering dinner tabs just this once. Over and over again, I said yes. And it wasn't just the money. It was the unspoken agreement that I was the one they could lean on, that I'd always come through, that my success made me responsible for their comfort. I never asked for thanks, but I also never imagined they'd feel entitled to my savings, that they'd see me in the shower, phone unlocked on the nightstand, and think, we deserve this. By midnight, I had highlighted over $27,000 in transfers, not including the wedding. That number sat heavy in my chest. I used to call it love, loyalty, being the reliable one. But now it looked like something else, a pattern of silent exploitation. Marcus stepped in with a mug of chamomile tea. You need to rest. I shook my head. I need to see it clearly. I've been generous, but they've been taking advantage for years. You always try to carry everyone, he said softly. But you were never meant to carry them alone. I thought about all the holidays I'd flown home early to help set up the last-minute wire transfers, the times I'd skipped out on vacations, promotions, opportunities because something came up, because someone needed me. But this was the first time they'd taken without asking, not as a plea, as a decision, a redistribution of what they thought was theirs to claim. A family meeting hadn't been called. No one had sat me down to talk about needs. There had been no conversation, no choice, just action. Rachel knew my password. They knew my schedule. They watched me step into the shower and saw their moment. I stared at the ceiling that night, wide awake. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was something colder, clearer. I realized that my role in this family wasn't daughter or sister anymore. It was provider. And like all roles taken for granted, I had become invisible, but not anymore. I wasn't going to shout. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to take the first step out of the silence I had helped build. And for the first time in years, maybe ever, I was going to put myself first. Not out of selfishness, but because giving doesn't mean disappearing. Because love without respect is not love. And because being the strong one doesn't mean being the used one. That night, I renamed the bank record spreadsheet, The Years of Giving. I saved it. And I slept finally. Tomorrow, I would start writing something else entirely. A new boundary. A new story. The next morning, I called my bank. The rep on the phone was polite but hesitant. All 3 transfers were authenticated using your device. Ms. Carter. Same IP address. Same login. No signs of a third-party breach. I leaned against the kitchen counter, feeling the cool granite press into my back, but I didn't authorize them. She lowered her voice slightly. Then, I'm afraid this may fall into a gray area, particularly if the transactions were made by someone you know, someone I trusted. I ended the call and sat down staring at the open laptop. On a hunch, I opened my notes app. Tucked between old grocery lists and recipe ideas was a document titled Family Estate Planning. It was a shared file I'd drafted months ago to help my mom sort out her will. I clicked it open and my breath caught. A digital signature, mine attached to a folder titled Family Emergency Access Agreement. I didn't remember signing it, I certainly hadn't agreed to give blanket financial access. I scrolled through the PDF and saw a paragraph that made my blood run cold. In the event of illness, incapacitation, or family emergency, all named family members, Karen Carter, Rachel Bloom, are permitted limited financial access to Emily Carter's primary savings and checking accounts for purposes deemed mutually beneficial to the Carter family's well-being. Below that, my digital signature. Backdated. 3 months. Marcus, I called, voice shaking. He walked in from the balcony. Look at this. He read silently, then narrowed his eyes. That's not legal. They can't just fabricate a financial access clause, but it has my signature, I whispered. He pulled out his phone. We need to talk to someone who can tell us what this really is. By noon, we were on a call with my old friend and attorney Nicole Huang. We'd gone to undergrad together before she went off to Stanford Law. I've seen something like this before, she said, tapping her keyboard. It's often used in elder care situations or with medical proxies. But what you're describing sounds shady at best. She paused. Emily, was your signature ever collected digitally for something else? A family trust? Maybe? I closed my eyes. Yes. When we refinanced the cabin in Bend 2 years ago, I signed some e-documents through Rachel's notary friend. Nicole sighed. That's probably where they got your signature file. They copied it onto this document. It won't hold up in court, but they'll pretend it's valid long enough to stall any charges. So what do? I asked quietly. Nicole's voice softened. We build a case. Start gathering every piece of evidence, messages, texts, anything that shows this wasn't voluntary. You're not crazy, Emily. You were deceived, and if they forged legal consent to cover that up, it's fraud. I nodded slowly, heart pounding. I felt the first twinge of anger. Not just hurt, not just sadness. Anger with teeth, because this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a plan. They hadn't just taken my money. They'd laid a paper trail designed to silence me if I ever fought back. But they'd forgotten one thing: I don't give up easily. Marcus reached across the table and took my hand. Whatever comes next, he said, we face it together. I looked out the window. The Portland sky, overcast but steady. I wasn't ready for war. Not yet, but I was done. Being silent. The truth had terms too, and I was ready to write mine. I didn't call anyone back. Not my mom, not Rachel, not Kevin, not even Eli. For 3 days, I let the silence speak, and oh, how they hated it. The first message came in late Sunday night, a text from Rachel. Hey, can we talk? You're blowing this way out of proportion. Then one from my mother the next morning. I don't understand why you're so upset. It was a family decision. You have so much. By Tuesday afternoon, my voicemail was full. Guilt cloaked in love. Confusion cloaked in concern. Not a single apology. Not even a hint of regret. And that told me everything I needed to know. On Wednesday, Kevin called Marcus. Not me, Marcus. Tell her we're willing to talk this out, he said. It doesn't need to go any further. Marcus hung up without responding. By then, Nicole had filed an official fraud alert with the bank and began the paperwork for a civil investigation. It wouldn't lead to arrests, not yet, but it created a formal trail. A warning shot. That night, I opened an email from my mom. Your actions are tearing this family apart, all over some digital transfers. And there it was. The real problem wasn't the theft. It was that I had dared to say no. They were used to my yes being immediate, unquestioned, automatic. My resistance now. It wasn't just inconvenient. It was betrayal. But I wasn't the betrayer. I was the boundary. On Thursday morning, my phone lit up with a new call. Eli. I hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen. Then I picked up. Hey, I said. He sounded tired. Are you okay? Not really. There was a pause. Then I didn't know. About the money. You didn't ask either. He exhaled. I just thought Mom was helping with the wedding, Rachel said. She handled it, said you'd offered. My jaw tightened. You think I would transfer 13 grand from my account without mentioning it? He was quiet for a long moment. No, he finally said. No, I don't. That was the first crack. He didn't defend them. He didn't accuse me. He just sat in the middle of the truth, no longer sure where loyalty should land. I'm sorry, Em, he said quietly. I should have checked. I should have asked. I didn't say it was okay because it wasn't. Instead, I said, I'm glad you called. And I meant it. That night, for the first time since the wedding, I slept through until morning. Not because things were fixed, but because the silence had finally broken on my terms. They could beg, they could bargain, but I wouldn't go back. Not to being the invisible helper, not to being the easy target. If they wanted to rebuild trust, it would be brick by brick. And I wasn't lifting the first stone. It came as a LinkedIn message 3 days after the confrontation, from a name I hadn't heard in 5 years. Janice Rowell, former VP of Strategic Partnerships at a firm I once consulted for during a freelance project in Chicago. The subject line read, "Let's talk." Emily, I clicked, expecting a polite check-in. But what I read stopped me cold. Hey, Emily, I've been following your career for a while and your name came up in a meeting this week. We're building something new at Halstead Advisory, a financial ethics and risk integrity division, and we need someone to lead it. I'd love to talk. This won't be about patching someone else's mess. This is about building a gold standard. If you're open, I can hop on a call tomorrow. Marcus noticed me frozen at the kitchen table, coffee gone cold in my hand. What's going on? Someone wants me to build something, I said softly, and they want me to lead it. The next day, Janice and I had a video call. It was warm, familiar. She remembered my past work like it had happened yesterday, the subtle way I handled audits, the way I coached junior analysts behind the scenes without ever needing credit. We've got funding. Emily. But more than that, we've got the vision. Transparency, accountability. No hidden policies. I want to bring in someone who knows how to build systems that are ethical, not just efficient. You'd be reporting directly to me. Full autonomy. Generous budget. I want your fingerprints on everything. I stared at her for a second, disbelief tugging at the corners of my voice. Why me? She smiled. Because I know what it's like to be underestimated, and I know what it looks like when someone quietly does the work of 5 people and never asks for applause. You deserve a space that respects that. I muted myself for a second, emotion catching in my throat. Then I unmuted and said, "Let's keep talking." After the call, Marcus handed me a cup of tea, so he asked, "They want me to lead, to build, and not just systems, a culture. And do you want it?" "Yes," I whispered. Not because I need to prove anything, but because I want to build something that outlives me, something I don't have to constantly defend. That night, I signed the letter of intent. I stared at the screen for a long time before hitting send. This wasn't about revenge. This wasn't about what my family had taken. This was about what I had left, and what I was finally ready to claim. In the days that followed, I started sketching frameworks, making notes, thinking about who I'd want to recruit. I reached out to a former junior analyst named Priya, who I mentored during my early years in Denver. She responded in 5 minutes. "You're building something, I'm in. Wherever, whenever." And that's when I realized maybe all those years of giving hadn't been wasted. Maybe they were just seeds waiting for the right place to bloom. In the corner of my desk, the legal documents still sat, the evidence, the timelines, the statements. I wasn't done with that chapter. Not yet. But I finally had another one to write, and for the first time the page felt entirely mine. While I was starting to outline new systems at Halstead, things were beginning to unravel at home, not mine, but the one I'd been born into. The silence I had offered my family wasn't retaliation. It was a decision I chose not to explain myself to people who treated my generosity as a resource to plunder. But silence has a power. They didn't anticipate. It creates a space where consequences echo louder. The first ripple came from my Aunt Lynn, a message almost casual. "Hey, honey, I heard some drama went down after the wedding. Your mom hasn't been herself. Just wanted to check on you." Then a second wave. My cousin Nora reached out. Rachel posted something cryptic about betrayal and money. "Is everything okay?" I didn't reply. I didn't explain. I didn't justify. Because what I knew, what they were beginning to feel, was that my absence meant something. For years I had been the glue, the unspoken safety net. Birthday dinners, covered by me. Holiday gifts for Olivia and Ethan. Shipped from my account emergency bills, I was the one they always called. And now I was gone. And they were crumbling. Marcus saw it before I did. The signs Rachel posting on Facebook about needing help with rent. Kevin asking on LinkedIn if anyone knew of finance gigs. My mother calling every third day and hanging up after one ring. "I think they thought you were bluffing," he said one evening. "But now they're realizing you're not coming back." The final proof came in the form of a voicemail. "Zoe, it's Mom. I don't know what to say anymore. I know things got out of hand, but Olivia's school needs payment next week and Rachel is at her wit's end. Please, just call me." I didn't. Instead, I forwarded the message to the family financial crimes investigator. Every word was logged as additional evidence, not out of vengeance, but out of protection. The truth needed to remain documented. Meanwhile, Halstead had quietly announced my new role. Internally first. Then, in a press release, Emily Green joins Halstead Advisory as Head of Financial Integrity Systems. Within 24 hours, I received 6 emails from former colleagues. 3 asked about roles. 2 sent congratulations. 1 said simply, "About time someone gave you what you've always deserved." The contrast between the 2 worlds I was straddling couldn't have been clearer. At home, guilt, manipulation, and betrayal. At work, structure, clarity, respect. And in the middle stood me. Not bitter, but awake. Then it happened. Jason called. "I just got off the phone with Rachel," he said. "She said Kevin might lose his job. Something about a credit flag and a pending civil suit." I stayed quiet. "And Mom?" he added, hesitating. Mom's friend told her that people are starting to talk about the court filing, about the police report. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "They're falling apart," he said finally. "And I think they're blaming you." My voice was calm. "They're reaping what they planted." "I just thought you should know," he murmured. "It's not pretty." I looked out the window. Across the Denver skyline, clouds gathered in thick blue-gray folds, and I thought to myself, no, it's not pretty. But sometimes collapse is necessary before rebuilding can begin. And this wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of what happens when people who took everything finally have to stand on their own. The voicemail came on a Wednesday, late evening, just after Marcus and I had finished dinner and were flipping channels with the kind of absent-minded comfort that only comes after a long day. My phone buzzed once. Then again, then a third time, I glanced at the screen. Mom missed call. Rachel missed call. Kevin voicemail. I let them pile up. I didn't move to answer. But then the 4th buzz came, and I saw a number I hadn't saved, but one I recognized. Jason. I picked up Emily. His voice came low and tight. "They want to talk." "All of them." I didn't respond. "They want to meet Mom. Said it's urgent." "Rachel's crying. Kevin's in trouble with his employer. They—" He trailed off. "They know they crossed a line." I was quiet for a moment. "And why are you calling me? Because I'm tired of being in the middle, because they've used you. And now they want to be forgiven, but not because they're sorry. Because they're scared." There it was. the clarity I'd waited for but never needed to speak. "I'll meet," I said one time. "In a public place." Marcus raised an eyebrow but said nothing. He just placed his hand gently over mine. The meeting was set for Sunday, a neutral cafe near the courthouse. Not too familiar, not too distant. Just exposed enough that no one could pretend to be anything they weren't. They were already seated when I arrived. My mother wore a cardigan she used to bring out for church. Rachel sat rigid, her hands clutched like prayer. Kevin sipped a coffee that must have gone cold hours ago. I sat down, silent. Rachel spoke first. "We messed up." My eyes didn't flinch. "We got desperate," she continued. "Kevin lost his bonus, Olivia's school fees." You thought you were entitled," I said. "Not just to my money, but to my silence, to my loyalty." Kevin leaned in. "Emily, we understand now. We're not asking you to drop everything, just help us through this rough patch." I almost laughed. "You've had years of rough patches. And every time I helped, not because I had to, but because I thought it meant something." "And what did you do the moment I stopped?" No one answered. I continued. "I came today for one reason, to say something clearly, with no emotion clouding it. I will not press charges beyond what's already been filed, but I will not withdraw them either. This was never about revenge, it was about respect. Something none of you ever gave." My mother's voice cracked. "We're family. This can't be how it ends." I looked at her eyes steady. "It ended the night you let my sister steal from me and called it generosity." Rachel's eyes filled. I didn't know how to ask anymore. Every time I called you sounded tired, like helping us was a chore. "It wasn't a chore," I replied. "It was love until you treated it like an ATM." Kevin opened his mouth to speak, but I raised a hand. "I'm building something now. A career, a team, a life. And I'm doing it with people who value effort, honesty, and reciprocity. I came to this meeting not because I owe you anything, but because I needed to hear it one last time. That you don't get it. And maybe never will." I stood up. "You don't need me back. You need to learn why I mattered." As I turned to leave, I caught Jason's eyes across the cafe window he had come but chosen not to enter. He nodded slowly. I stepped into the sun, and for the first time, the weight wasn't mine to carry anymore. It was theirs. At Halstead, the lights turned on early. The workday began before 9, but I found myself arriving by 7:30, coffee in hand, ideas scribbled on notepads. My mind clear in a way it hadn't been in years. This wasn't just a new job. It was a rebuilding of career, of purpose, of self. I sat in my corner office with windows that overlooked the Denver skyline. But it wasn't the view that mattered. It was the air calm, free of tension, of obligation, of unspoken expectations. For the first time in a long time, I was working somewhere that didn't demand my silence to keep the peace. When Maya Halstead's CTO asked me to build a team, I knew exactly where to start. Not with resumes, not with prestige, but with mindset. I chose people who asked the right questions, who listened before offering solutions, who saw systems not just as code but as living things. People who valued transparency, not secrecy. Collaboration, not ego. Within 3 months, we had a working prototype of the IntegrityNet framework. A financial verification engine designed to prevent the very kind of exploitation I had lived through. Our team culture was built around one rule document. Everything. No knowledge hoarding, no hidden workflows, no making oneself indispensable by obscuring the process. Because I had lived the opposite, and I knew what it cost. At our first all-team lunch, I stood before the room and said, "We're not building this to be clever. We're building it to last. If I walk away tomorrow, it should still work. That's how you know you've done your job right?" The room was quiet. Then, one by one, heads nodded. Someone clapped, then another. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was acknowledgement the kind I had once begged for and now received in quiet waves, and slowly the thing I feared most, that I would always carry the bitterness of betrayal, began to fade. In its place grew something steadier. Conviction that we don't just set boundaries to protect ourselves. We set them so that others can learn what respect looks like. The more I poured into my work, the more people reached out. Former colleagues, quiet messages from women in finance. I heard what happened. They'd write, "Thank you for standing your ground." Even strangers from the forum where my story had anonymously circulated began reaching out. "Because of you," one message read. "I finally said no to my sister's constant requests, and I don't feel guilty anymore." This, I realized, was the foundation I wanted to build. Not just software, but strength. Not just architecture, but advocacy. Because I wasn't alone, and I never had been. I'd just been quiet, but not anymore. It started with whispers, a missing contract. Here, a delayed payroll there. Then came the headlines. Cortrex executives under review for financial mismanagement. I read the headline from my office at Halstead, the afternoon light casting shadows across my desk. I didn't feel triumph. I felt confirmation. They had dismantled something solid and built a castle on sand. And now the tide had come. 2 weeks later, I got the call from Maya. "We've been offered a chance to acquire Cortrex's data infrastructure, pennies on the dollar," she said. "They're desperate and they know you're the only one who can make sense of what's left." I didn't respond right away. "I know what that place meant to you," she added gently. "And what it took from you, what it tried to take," I corrected. She smiled. "That's why I'm asking. Do you want to lead the integration?" I thought about the long nights I spent building those systems, the silence after the betrayal. The moment I said no and walked away, I thought about the lessons, the scars, the strength. "Yes," I said, "but we do it my way, which means full documentation, transparent process, no more black boxes, no more hero coders, and every remaining Cortrex employee gets retrained or let go with dignity." Maya nodded, agreed. 3 weeks later, I walked through the doors of my old company. But this time, I didn't scan a badge. I walked in through the front as a guest and a guide. The lobby looked smaller, the energy thinner. Half the faces were gone. Some former colleagues glanced up and quickly looked away. Others nodded silently. A few offered faint, tentative smiles. They remembered, not just who I was, but what I had tried to protect. In the server room, I stood in front of a console I once knew better than my own reflection. The code still bore my signature not in name, but in logic, in structure. In the quiet integrity of systems built to withstand pressure, Jason, one of the few engineers who stayed, walked beside me. "It's strange," he said. "We used to say you were too controlling. But now that it's chaos, we realize you were the one holding it all together." I didn't say anything. Just kept walking. We migrated what we could. Retired. What was obsolete? Built bridges where data silos had been. And slowly, Cortrex, or what remained of it, became part of something better. One morning, while reviewing the final integration report, I received an internal message from Maya. "You were right. The best revenge isn't revenge. It's redesign." I smiled. Because it wasn't just about building back what was broken, it was about proving to myself and others that the right thing done the right way eventually wins. Even if no one claps, even if no one says thank you. Because the systems we build and the boundaries we hold outlast the noise. The room was quiet, filled with the soft clack of keyboards and the low hum of ideas taking shape. I stood at the front of the conference room, marker in hand, whiteboard behind me filled with diagrams that weren't just technical, they were philosophical. "Your job," I said, "isn't to become indispensable. Your job is to build something that works long after you're gone." A dozen bright eyes looked back at me. Coders, analysts, architects, young, brilliant, curious. I wasn't just leading the team, now I was teaching a generation. It was the launch of Halsted's Systems Academy, a new internal program designed to train engineers not only to code but to think in systems, to build with clarity, to share knowledge, to leave no corner undocumented. This was my legacy. Not a monument, a movement. I created the first module myself, from chaos to clarity, designing with exit in mind. It wasn't flashy. It was practical, grounded, infused with everything I had learned the hard way. In our first week, we covered documenting not just what the code does, but why it exists, building in layers of fallback and transparency, ensuring no system breaks because a single person isn't there to fix it. I told them, if you walk away tomorrow and your system still runs like it should, that's the highest praise you can get. There was silence at first, then a slow, thoughtful nod from one of the junior engineers in the back. And I knew it had landed. Outside of the program, the ripples continued. I received quiet emails from former Cortrex employees, now starting over. Some wanted mentorship. Others just wanted to say thank you for standing up, for saying what they hadn't found, the words for Vanessa. A senior executive at a competing firm reached out to invite me to speak at a tech ethics summit. We need more voices like yours, she said. People who remember that systems don't just run companies, they affect people. I accepted. Because I wasn't just done healing, I was building forward. One Friday afternoon, as I packed up to leave early, Maya stepped into my office. Got a minute? She asked. Always. She held up a framed photo, our first team at Systems Academy, everyone smiling awkwardly at the camera. We're submitting this program to the National Board of Tech Education. They think it might be a model for industry-wide adoption. I took the photo, ran my fingers along the frame. You think they're ready? She smiled. I think you made them ready. That evening, as I stepped out into the soft Denver twilight, I thought about where this all began. A betrayal, a loss, a silence, a decision, and now a foundation. I walked through the park by my apartment, passing the bench where I once sat crying after that first confrontation with my family. I no longer avoided it. I sat there again, not as the woman who had been hurt, but as the woman who had decided to rebuild. And then I whispered the words I now told every student in the academy: build it so that someday when you walk away, it still stands.